And we are live.
Hello, folks.
Give it just a
Get
second.
our technology a minute to gather its wits. We all get started. You guys are in for a treat.
Okay, we are live on one of the apparati. Now we need to wait
There
for
I
the
am.
other apparati. There we go. And we are live. Okay, let's turn that
Hello,
down.
folks.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Black Hat Classroom. This is the third event of this year's Black Hat Comics, Rockin' Milpitas pre-Comic-Con Comic-Con. Tonight you guys are in for a treat. You are going to get an art lesson from a working professional artist. Our friend and fellow comic book professional, Emonic, is here to have some fun and help us all learn a little something. Why don't you take it away, sir? Let us know what we're doing here today.
Hey, how's it going? Okay, so thanks for having me, first of all, you guys.
Comic-Con. Tonight you guys are in for a treat. You are going to get an art lesson from a working professional.
So yeah, my name's Emonic. I live here in the Bay Area. I do illustration and graphic design professionally, and I also work in comics. I've been asked to go ahead and go through my process on how I go about working or starting a page and getting to the end of it. Each artist has a different way about going about their process. There's no right way. For every artist, it's pretty much like how you like your music and how you wear your clothes. It's unto that person. So doing artwork is very much like that, and drawing comics is very much like that. So I tend to kind of jump around, and I'm going to go through my process as best that I can with the time that we have, and talk about how I start and how I finish. So basically, once again, thank you guys for tuning in and having me participate. I know a lot of people we're planning to be at Comic-Con, but we're doing this, which is really cool. And this is free to everybody, and participate. And if you've been wanting to get into comics, hopefully this helps you out. If you're already in comics, then you'll probably find some of this process a little frustrating if you have your own way of doing things. In that regard, again, there is no right way or wrong way to do it as long as you get the results that you're trying to go for. So again, bear with me. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about my process and how I go about doing things. Everything really kind of tends to lend itself in the aspect of visuals, obviously, because we're visually telling a story. So I'm going to go ahead and show my screen here, and
I'm going to get my blank Superman comic and draw along with my third grade art talent. Or the folks at home feel more comfortable about their own talent when they see how sad mine is.
So before I start into actually drawing, and let's go ahead and normally I would go ahead and handle everything with pen and ink and brush, but we only have an hour, so we only have so much time in order to kind of show you what everything is going on. So again, I'm going to go ahead and show you my process of how I start off and where I kind of tend to go. So I'm going to share my screen here, and I am hopefully host disabled attendee sharing screen. So I think you guys need to allow me to share my screen with you so that I can share my screen with everybody that's watching with us, along with us here. And let's see here. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and let's talk a little bit about the drawing process that I use. I tend to use, or the tools that I use, basically. I tend to use pretty basic tools when I'm drawing. I use a coal erase blue pencil, And when I'm inking, I'll use Winsor Newton Series 7 Sable Brush, which is a 000 for inking. I'll also use one of these Pentel brush pens for inking as well. It depends on the type of effect that I'm trying to go for, and also depends on the paper that I'm working on. I tend to work on different types of substrates of paper. So some inks work better on certain papers. If in fact the ink is a little too thick, it'll sit on top of the paper. Certain bristles, the ink will just sit on top. So you always have to kind of gauge what ink works best with what paper that you're working on. But I tend to kind of go through these, and I'll use a kneaded eraser. When I'm drawing and I'm getting my ideas up, I don't necessarily know where it is, how I'm going to start. I just know I need to get to this finish line. So I just start drawing things. And quite honestly, I'll just grab a pen and I'll just draw like on a little piece of paper. And like, this is a whole little comic layout that was done for a process for my my art class, just kind of talking about storytelling and whatnot. But I'll just take a ballpoint pen and just quickly lay out what it is I'm trying to do, and thought of my panel layout. And it'll tend to kind of turn into something a little bit more detailed like this, where I'll go ahead. And this is just, you know, I went ahead and took a regular HB pencil, quickly laid out what panels are going to go what, and then I went straight in with a brush pen, and that's what that looks like. And I'll show everybody a little bit better on screen what that looks like. So generally for comic pages, they are a size of about 11 by 17, but as of recent, some artists have gone a lot smaller. For example, I know Eric Canetti, who does a lot of Marvel comics and has worked in the business for a long time. His pages are smaller. So it doesn't necessarily matter on the size of your page any longer. It just matters whether or not you can fit that artwork for the format that you're trying to present it in, whatever printed material format. That's really what it comes down to. So again, size seems to be, there were standards before, and now where we're at, things have kind of changed with the ability of having Photoshop and different applications that you're able to draw with. I tend to use Photoshop a little bit. I'll use Procreate on my tablet when I'm doing layouts. But nothing seems to kind of beat just having a pen and having some ink and just letting my thoughts kind of go about the page. I really don't worry about so much the technology, because I feel like I'm working against it. I just want to be able to draw. And when I'm working with technology, I feel like there's a 3-point process. I'm having to worry about the program, having to worry about the equipment, and I'm having to worry about myself, making sure I'm getting those type of certain aspects. When I'm just drawing, it's just my pencil and the paper, and I just go. Also, I'll tend to use just regular printing paper. It's nothing fantastic when I'm working out and ideas, and I'll work on little character designs that look like this. This is just like on regular bound printing paper. And this is just a mishmash of mediums on it, from anything from colored pencil to marker to a little bit of acrylic. And I'll get stuff like this. Anyhow, moving on. Am I able to share my screen with you guys now successfully?
Try it. It seems to be, nothing's changed on my end, but it says you should be able to, so.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead to the best of my ability and try to move this screen over. I've got a bunch of different things on my desktop here, so bear with me in this thing here. All right, awesome. Are you guys able to see that?
We'll give it a second.
Yep.
Yeah,
oh,
there
awesome.
it is.
That's
cool.
great.
Okay, so you guys are able to see my desktop, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. So as I was saying before, I'll go ahead and I will break down things and try to get the visual beats as best as possible. You know, comics, I tend to say doing artwork and doing comics are two different things. You change gears. I feel like doing comics is very much it's homework. in the sense that you have to pay attention to that you're trying to get certain visual beats in storytelling and trying to compact this story in such a way where anybody's able to read it and they're not confused. So each artist, again, has their own way about doing it. This is my process. And what I do is I try to get the visual beats as best as possible. And this is about how I go about doing it. This is a first page layout for this project I was working on. And you can see that there's a cavern, there's my figure here, and there's something here, and obviously he's in some type of forest. But also I'll interject and you'll notice I put an arrow here, meaning that let's go ahead and let's flip this. This panel should go to the bottom and this panel should be on top. So I'll go ahead and I'll make these little notes. And you'll notice all this little squiggly line work here. This is just printout paper. Like, this is how I work. Like, on that instant when I have that idea, that's when I'll start working. And so on the side here, I have all these ideas of what I want to see happen. And there are little other steps that need to be included in this sequence of a bigger page somehow, some way. And then I'll move on over again, trying to figure out what this character not only looks like, but also like how ominous it's going to be, how dark the base of the panels going to be. Is this going to be a 2-panel thing? Is it going to be a 3-panel thing? Kind of working that idea out, as well as working out the character design. So this is what something looks like, a little really free reign. I'll show you how I also go about. Right here, this is 5 pages. I'll work so rapidly where it looks like a lot like chicken scratch, but I can read this, and that really it doesn't matter, if whether or not somebody else can read it. It matters whether or not I can read it. That's really what it comes down to, because I'm the one that's going to have to do the work. So I try my best to go ahead and give myself as much visual information. This is 1 page here. This is 2 pages right here. This is 3 pages. This is 4, and this is 5. And this is a shorthand of how I go about laying stuff out. And this is done digitally real quick. As I said before, sometimes I'll work with my iPad, or I'll work with pen and paper. It depends on what I have and what I'm working on. And I'll be in the middle of work, and quite honestly, I'm thinking about in the background about this other project. And so I'll tend to kind of like open up another file and start working on that as well. That's just kind of how I've worked over the years. So
like one idea inspires another idea.
Exactly, very much so. What something looks like a little bit cleaner. So these are pages that I did for Gévaudan Ferret Press years ago. And hopefully everybody's able to see this.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the opening pages for that book. And so one of the things you want to do when storytelling is you want to hit certain beats. And in the beginning of this story, we're establishing where this character is, and we're trying to establish that this character is moving through a certain area. And obviously it's through some hills, and it looks like it's a forest and through some hills here. And with the look on our character's face, it looks as though there's something going on, quite honestly. And it's very dark. The colors at the end are moody and stuff. But just the pencils themselves, worrying about the pencils themselves, that process, laying everything out, you're trying to do certain beats. You're trying to get from A to B to C to D. And you want to take your reader visually through the world that you're trying to explain where you're at, and as best as possible. You never want the reader to go, where are we? You never want the reader to be confused of what's going on in this story. And your job as a storyteller is to try to put as much visual information in there as possible to let your viewer know and kind of put them in that environment, their mind in that environment. And that's the beauty about comics too, is that being able to put anybody in that environment. Doesn't matter where they're from. When they look at that comic, they understand exactly what's going on when you take away that all the dialogue and written material. That's what I really love about comics, is that if in fact it's done really well, it doesn't really matter what's going on in the text generally. I feel that way pretty much with music too. So in music, you're looking to get certain beats and crescendos, and in comics, you're looking to get those certain beats and crescendos. And so for this next page here, obviously our character is continuing to run through, and he's got something that's chasing him here, and we obviously can tell that there's more of a situation going on. And so just in the 2 pages we've established, in the first page we established where the character is, and obviously there's something going on. In the second page, it's been established that there's something that's chasing him. We don't know necessarily what, but it's something that's ominous. And this guy is really scared to the point where he's not paying attention, and he trips on something on a branch here, and he runs into what looks like a gravestone. So what I try to do is I'll try to read the script and where the writer lets me interpret certain things and where the writer wants me to make sure that I have certain things in there. Some writers are very, very exact of they want A, B, and C. Some writers will give you leeway and say, hey, I'm looking for this. I don't know how it looks yet. Why don't you go ahead and give me an idea of what this looks like? But I want it to feel dark. I want it to feel bright. I want it to feel like the character is, afraid. So little information like that will be in the script for me. So I'm going to go ahead also and talk about what it looks like and give examples of what it looks like to have some of these pages.
Can I ask a question too?
Yes, most definitely, please.
So when you're thinking about pacing and what you want the user, like that kind of anticipation and turning the page, is that something that you create, or is that something that the writer directs you to? Like, does the writer have an idea of what's the pacing of it, or is it more of a collaboration?
I think it depends on the person that you're working with. If they happen to be friends of yours, I feel, or you have some type of camaraderie with that writer, I think things are, there's more of an open door of being able to go ahead and take liberties with certain things. When you haven't worked with a writer at all, they're pretty exact on what they want. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you whether or not they trust you on making certain decisions, putting a panel possibly on the following page instead of the last page, because It didn't work really well. Adjustments like that are always kind of being made, and that's why we have editors, so that we're able as artists to kind of step back because we're too close to the work. A job for an editor is to look at everything and make sure that it visually reads and it's still organized. Because as artists, and when you're working on something, you're too close to it sometimes, and if you don't learn to step away and really analyze what you're doing, you can tend to run into those roadblocks of making a decision that might hurt the book and hurt the rhythm of the paging, of the sequence of paging. Gotcha. So in answer, it depends on who you're working with and how they feel about being really stringent to the script or allowing some of those liberties. So, for the writer that I worked with, we were friends, and he was pretty, even though we are friends, he was pretty exact on having certain pages have certain things on a specific page. Like I couldn't run over because he's expecting on page 5 to reflect this, and on page 12 it needs to have this type of crescendo. It needs to be built up here at the beginning. So these are things you kind of need to be aware of. And then what I'm doing is I try to go through it as fast as I possibly can, in that, maybe I shouldn't say as fast as I possibly can, but to the best way that I can in order to give the writer my layouts going, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And so this is a perfect example of what I would send a writer. This is all done in ballpoint pen right here. And I'll just go ahead and say, all right, this is what I'm thinking. I'm taking the character through. He's going to slam the door. He's pushing on the door. And then we're in this room. And obviously we get to our character here. I send that to the writer, and then the writer will go ahead and make sure that it reflects the dialogue that he's trying to convey, and make sure that it hits all those beats. And again, speaking about having certain beats and crescendos. This is our beat here. It's a very fast-paced situation that's going on right here. All of a sudden, we establish where our character is, and here's our crescendo, our final hit. Oh, there's this other character, and obviously this character is hooded, so there's this whole dark situation that's going on. So that's, let's see here. What else can I show?
If you can stay on that page 1 second, what you're talking about reminds me of so much of the core of animation school. When we talked about storyboarding and pre-production work and all this kind of stuff, which was kind of in my wheelhouse being a comic book fan. We talked about the peak moments. And what you have here, like in that middle top panel of the guy pressing against the wall, the one next to it with the guy pressing to the door, you know, you're looking for those, like I say, peak moments of the action. He's not stepping up to the door, or you don't draw him kind of turning his back to the door about to be in this pose. You draw the pose of the most action, the most strength. You know, you think about the sequence of action, and then give them the best perspectives like you have in the next one. It's all about, you know, like I say, in animation, you have to take them between these moments. But in the storyboarding, you have to show them the peak moments, like you're saying, to hit all of those beats. I think that's important. It's important for the writer to think about, and it's certainly important for the artist to think about.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I agree. And in that sense that of animation, definitely, I think it helps to watch a lot of animation and visual movies. I mean, we're visual storytellers, and quite often people ask, well, how do I start? You know, how do I start a page, or how's the best way to maybe do a layout of sequence or everything? You know, one of the best ways is maybe take like your favorite movie, and let's go ahead and let's say Star Wars, like that opening scene. So the ships going in overhead, that would be one panel. And then after we would see that in the second panel that the main ship is being followed by one of the larger ships. And then the next panel, we would go ahead and close in on the situation of obviously that they're catching up and that they're firing at them. And then that last panel is the characters reacting. That would be your whole sequence. That's 4 panels right there. And all of that is within those shots taken from that sequence. And that would be a way to break that down. So taking your movies or media that you watch and copying that step for step and finding those little points and drawing those points, that's a way of storytelling. And basically going back to the storyboarding situation, that's very much in the way of how they create film. A lot of directors will work off of storyboards and the visual layout of where a story is going to go visually, where they're going to have their camera. The cinematographers don't get enough credit for the work that they put in. A lot of cinematographers do not get. The director obviously has an eye for doing it, but it's really the cinematographer that brings some of that magic into how those shots are going to look that we've fallen in love with when we see certain movies. And so cinematography is a very, very big, important thing that gets underrated, I think, in talking about movies. And so paying attention to the eyes is really important, and what it is, the process of where they're panning the camera, how they're holding onto a shot. If we're talking about certain directors that have become, really famous for their directing because of their visual eye, Stanley Kubrick happens to be one. Watch 2001: Space Odyssey. That right there is a perfect example of having a visual style. There's just, there's a reason that director has been copied so many times. But in regards to comics, how does this relate to comics? That visual aspect and what they're doing there can be transposed, maybe that's not but basically used in helping you create your own comics, using that type of stuff in order to help inspire you and give you direction on what it is that you want to do.
Sure. So I think that's your challenge as a comic artist, is that you have to be the director and the cinematographer and the storyboarder and all these things. That's the fun, but like I say, it's also, I think, a big part of the challenge.
Right. And there are some artists that are really, really fast, at doing that. I'm obviously wearing a Kirby shirt, and so like Kirby, let's go ahead and talk about Kirby. That's the reason Kirby was king. This guy would knock out pages, 7 to 11 pages at his home, no computer, large format pages, drawing them out, and then that's really unheard of. Not a lot of artists are able to do that. And when you start doing comics, you start understanding the amount of skill set that that man had for doing what it was that he was doing when creating storytelling and drawing each of those panels. It's not very easy. And like I said, it's very much in the scale of like, it's homework. You're paying attention to the beats and whatnot. Okay, so obviously I'll send this first one over to the writer, and they'll go ahead and person will look at it and make sure that all those beats are there. And then I'll take that portion and I'll go ahead and go over those roughs again. I'll probably print it out, or depending on how my time is, I'll go ahead and I'll lightbox it. And then I'll go ahead and start tightening things up, making sure that all the angles are correct and all my draftsmanship is correct. And then once I have that, then I have something that ends up looking like this, which is a lot more of the tighter pencils. And now we can see our character, his face reactions, and we see more of the detail of where our character is. You'll notice straight from the start here, we've changed the scale of this last panel, and we've also changed the angle. We've reversed it, and so it didn't work one way. So in the storytelling, and also it wasn't really showing the grand area of the structure or the building that our character is in. We want to make sure that we're showing that. So we made those panels, we made that panel situation a little bit bigger. And so we changed a few things from the beginning to the end here. And then the final, go ahead.
Can I ask you a sort of stupid question?
No, it's fine.
Is the second and third page literally the same page? When you said clean it up,
Mm-hmm.
is that third page literally that second page with like eraser and some white, with all the magic that you do? Is it literally the same page?
Yeah, that's
not redraw the third page.
Yeah, the second and third page, I'll go ahead, and you'll notice even for the third panel here, it's redone. Instead of having them at an angle, we have them more at a side here. Again, that panel's been changed just for visual rhythm, to make sure that it insinuates that there's more pressure going on the character of the whole situation of the door being closed. So it's actually just go ahead and I'll buff this out and redo it again. And then when I get to the clean part, I'll just redraw it and clean everything up and make everything tighter. And this is what our page ends up looking like once it was colored and brought in and put text on and everything. So this is what a page looks like from beginning to end. And this is the final result of what we try to get to, or what artists try to get to.
So awesome.
That's awesome. That's a great page.
So I figure also, you know, my style, I tend to have a couple, I don't know if I have a couple different styles or whatever, just whatever I feel comfortable about drawing in that. And so I'll show you guys a little bit something that looks different. This is more of a digital aspect comic that I'm working on as well. And this is more in terms of like what how we used to get when we used to read comics in the newspaper, like the funny pages. You only have so many you only have a snippet of a comic. And so this is a format that I've been working on for a little while. I've always enjoyed those adventure style comics, when you would have just a little snippet of them. I've gone back and I've been looking at the old Star Wars used to be in the newspaper. For a lot of you, obviously you don't read newspapers any longer, but for us older guys, we did. And that was a big thing. Calvin and Hobbes and whatever else was in the newspaper, the Peanuts, Garfield, you know, Marmaduke, Family Circus, you know, you see.
Valiant.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of this style of comic. It harkens back to that. And this is all digital, and this is a project I'm working on. And so it has a whole different feel and style and colorway. I'm handling all the responsibilities on it, so it looks quite a bit different. I'll show you 2 more things. Again, I'll tend to work on stuff that on multiple things, multiple projects at once. And, this is just a quick digital layout. And it's only 2 panels, but just with these two panels, I know where I'm going with this. Obviously, our character is kind of seeing something here, and obviously our character is dragging something out of the desert here. And then there's this thing in 1986, a man pulled a skull of the size of a mammoth outside the desert, proving that giants do exist. Just with that little snippet, that kind of just starts the story of what's going to happen. It didn't really take too much, as long as all the visual information was there. And so pretty much that's what you want to try to do. You want to try to make it as concise as possible to the best of your ability. Something else I'm working on right now that might, this is more of the current project I'm working on right now. Obviously, this is a weird door, and we have what looks like an ape on top of a table here, and we have a doctor that's all covered up. He's working here, and there's the side of the ape, and obviously this ape doesn't seem like he's having a good day. So, but I've established, that there's something happening behind these very weird, strange doors, and then when you come into here, obviously we start to find out more. But this is the whole different type of style of comic in which I'm working on right now. And the inking will be handled a lot more in the traditional sense of like the creepy stuff that people have kind of known me to be working on. This is a project that's being that who's writing is Chris Wisnia wrote this project for me. So I've been working on this every so often right now. So if there's any questions, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to switch my screen over, and I'll go ahead and do a quick layout digitally. And if you guys have any questions for me. Also, too, I think it should be said, do I look at reference material to get inspiration for the stuff that I do? Yes, I do. There are some books I'd like to go ahead and mention that I think really help comic book artists, essentially. And I've got a couple here. So for those of you that are not aware or are aware of Will Eisner, he's a big deal. He is our godfather. He's the guy who coined the term graphic novel. There's a reason we get awards that are considered our Oscars, Eisners. Will Eisner is a big deal. And if you don't know about him, take some time and educate yourself and find out who he is. There's a whole bunch of books that are based on Eisner's style that were put out on sequential drawing and just comic books and the aspect and detail of how to go about breaking panels down. This is one of those books to have in your arsenal to kind of go to. I know that a lot of people are always about like, well, I can find it online, or I can, read it online. There's nothing that, for me, nothing beats a book. Having to go to your reference. The most valuable thing that you can have as an artist is your library. And so this should be one of those things that's in your library if in fact you want to be a comic book artist, or if you want to be a storyteller.
I was going to chime in and say pretty much anybody should own and read that book. If you have any kind of interest in comics at all of those Eisner art books are fascinating reads because you learn something that I say all the time, which is he did all those things that are considered medium changing, all those things the image guys do, all the fancy new guys do all these things. Eisner did it like 75 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. And so, that work still stands up there. You're right. Just being a storyteller of any sort, really, that Eisner stuff really helps. Another book that helps, or that I've gone to, and I've had this for quite some time, is called Working Methods. And there's quite a few artists that are in here. I know buddy of mine, Jim Offwood's in here, and each artist used the same script for 4 pages of a story, and you can go through how they break down their process, and each one is different. They're telling the same story, but they all visually have their own visual style. So this is a perfect example of what I was speaking about. Each artist has a style and a way of breaking it down, and they go into detail of how they go about doing it. It's called Working Method. It's by John Lowe. Hopefully you can still find this around. This is a really good book to have. I think also too, Brian Hitch's Ultimate Comic Studio is a pretty good book too. He has a really good way of breaking down his process. And for those of you that are just getting into comic books or want to learn what specific tools to have and what a good visual rhythm is to start from, he's definitely one of those guys. I think in this book, it really, really helps out. So when I was young, one of the things, because a lot of these books weren't around when I was younger, we used to get things like this. These are the black and whites that used to be sent to stores.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so these black and whites would come out. In addition, they're basically previews that would happen for comic books that would be sent in the boxes that were sent with the comic books. DC and Marvel, I know, would send out some of these. This is a DC one. And what I would do when I would study it is I would take the black and whites and go through them. And what's funny is too, also, since these were not always the final product, you would see a lot of the notes that would be on the side. And also some of the pages would be different. The situation of maybe flipping a panel, or perhaps even doing away with a whole panel or a whole page sometimes ended up happening. But these are always really good to learn from. So these are the things that I would kind of get a hold of from my local comic book store when they knew I was working on comics, and they would hand these to me. So if you can get your hands on a few of these, sometimes actually they're available online. And if you take some time, piece them together, you know, you print one out and have a few of those for yourself as well. And that really helps out. A couple artists that I think we should probably talk about as far as doing comics and the visual style, something that's really simple and something that I think is worth mentioning. Obviously, I've talked about Mobius before, but I'll talk about him until, you know, I'm not able to. And there is a reason why a lot of artists go to Mobius. There's a visual style. We were talking about using, being able to draw comics and not having wording there, but just have the visual aspect take you through the whole story. Mobius is able to do this in just a few panels. And if you're able to get yourself on some Mobius comic strips and things, this one was put out by Dark Horse on the Arzak project that he had. Try to find that stuff online, or, you know, look up, see if in fact you can order it from Black Cat. And this is stuff definitely to check out and help you kind of inspire you to doing sequential comics. There's a reason this guy has not only done comics, but also done storyboarding and also worked in movies as well. As we were saying, that stuff is transferable in creating some of the visual aspects for the most amazing storytelling for movies that we've ended up having in cinema. Mouse Guard is one of those comics that I think a lot of people should check out as well. The storytelling is very, very simple in panel work, but you know, Dave Peterson does a really good job in just a few panels and expressing what's going on for his world and with these mice and having to battle different animals that they go through on their journey. And the colors are great. And this just great storytelling. So Mouse Guard, if you get yourself on some of that, that would be really good. Also, Nate Powell's Swallow Me Whole, this book, really like this. For those of you that just love that style of graphic novel and just black and white, this is something to see. He does a lot of, I would say, in the sense of what's maybe darker material, or something that may be a little bit more like in what Vertigo does. Things that are a little bit more, not very superhero, but very mystic, or there's something going on of like a ghost or whatever. But Nate Powell does a really good job in Swallow Me Whole. And this sequence, the sequences that he goes about in for his storytelling are very, very simple, but he does a really good job of hitting certain beats and being able to convey a certain amount of emotions, you know, for some of the most darkest of things is perhaps like a person passing away or somebody having to deal with that, you know. Another book would be Asaf Hanukkah. I hope I'm pronouncing his first name right. He is a twin of another Hanukkah who's another artist, but this book is amazing because he is online on Instagram. I believe he's under his name, if I'm not mistaken, but he very much has a Mobius way of doing it. And he does single panel comics, or single page comics, and he'll put those up online. And he does an amazing job, very much in the way that what Mobius does. And his colors are amazing, and some of this stuff is just really funny, and it relates to his life and what's going on in his personal, how he views what's going on in his personal life with his family, or having to deal with situations of work, or having to even to draw, you know. So
Awesome.
Pretty amazing artist. Okay, so I wanted to go ahead and share some of that material with people. If you guys can get some of that stuff, I think it might help you out on the stuff that I go to.
And you know, we've got a question.
Yeah.
The title of the project that you're working on with Chris?
We don't have a specific title as of yet right now. We have a couple of titles that we were rocking around on it, and I think like once we get past the point where we're going to start advertising it, I think we'll probably figure out then. We've kind of changed up quite often of what it is that we're doing, and yeah, I don't know. Titles are hard. I feel like once you have a title on it, you have a label on it, you're like, okay, we're going in this direction. And he definitely has a script that's catered to what I've been working on. So I've got a couple ideas, but no, the short answer is we don't have a title as of yet. Hopefully soon we will let you know once it is ready.
So going to emonic.net, you'll post it there when it's ready.
When the news is released.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully very soon.
I've got a couple questions about portfolios.
Sure.
So briefly, I suppose, because like you say, everybody's going to be different. Every what people are trying to do is going to be different. But what are a couple of things everybody needs in their portfolio? And what are a couple of things people can do once they have one? I get asked, send it to DC Comics is this thing. But obviously there's got to be more. Let me be even more specific. Like you're working with a writer. You've been around, so they probably find you. But like I say, so I'm Bob, and I think I'm chock full of talent. What do I need in my portfolio, and what do I do with it when I have it together?
I think there's a couple of things with that. So one, if you have the chops, definitely your work is going to speak for itself. You should never have to talk too much for your work. If you've done your job, the work will speak for itself. If you have to explain what you're doing to the person that's looking at, consistently making excuses like I wanted to do this but I didn't do that, that's not going to be good. You want to be able to have at least maybe about, I don't know, maybe 15-20 pages of like different sequential work that you work on if in fact you're looking to get into comics. The ability about being able to go to shows, we don't have them right now at this moment, but when you did and they were prevalent, that would be a time to go to a show and bring your work. You never want to show half finished work. You want to show finished work. Don't waste their time. Don't waste your time either. You only have a certain amount of time in order to spend with that person, so you want to make the best. You want to use it as wisely as possible, so you want to make the best impression. So bring finished work. You want to go ahead, and if you're specifically looking to get into a specific genre of comic, have that material, that style material that you're showing that artist. Don't show the material that you did working on another project, and that's not the stuff that you want to be known for. Like you need to be specific of what type of audience you're trying to gear for. Know your audience. I would say about 15 to 20 pages. Have your artwork, I would think, available online so that when they're able to and want to look at it further in more detail with other people within their ranks, they're able to do that. Being upfront about what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing, that's really important. I think that some people become a little, they'll be facetious about what they're able to do and what they're not able to do. Because if in fact you're not honest, you're going to get yourself in a situation where you're not able to fulfill the demand that they're asking for. So be honest with yourself of what you're capable about doing.
Good advice.
The other thing is you know, have fun with it. Don't stress yourself too much out of it. I mean, keep in mind, comics are supposed to be fun. Obviously, it's a job and stuff, but you want to try to draw the stuff that you feel very passionate about. Don't draw the stuff just because it happens to be that thing that everybody wants right now. If you're very passionate about robots, draw all that stuff. If you're very passionate about, superheroes and capes, then draw that stuff. If you're very passionate about stuff that looks like Hellboy or looks like heavy metal or dark things, draw that stuff. Draw what it is that makes you passionate. Don't try to steer yourself for something else, because what ends up happening is you're just going to be really frustrated having to draw that stuff, because you're going to be stuck by yourself a long period of time making those drawings that you don't want to do. So I would say be conscious of that when you're applying for doing a publishing job. Also, too, going to shows, creating that face time is really important if in fact you have the ability to do it. If you happen to be somewhere that doesn't happen to have a show, find out if in fact those writers, find out who those writers are for those favorite books, or find out who those editors are. Hit them up, find out if in fact they're on Instagram, on Facebook. Don't be a pest, but just say, hey, I found out that you worked on this book. I'm very much interested in participating and trying to work with your company. This is what I have. When you have a chance, could you please take a look at it? And then send them the work. That's it. Leave it alone. See what type of reply that you get. And quite honestly, if you have work and it's substantial, they'll usually hit you back and let you know straight away whether or not they're able to do something with you or not. But also keep in mind, they're getting tons of submissions in all the time as well. So if you don't get a reply back, it doesn't mean that they're trying to shine you on. They probably just can't. Comics obviously is a business, and they're there to make money, and they're trying to figure out the best artist for the best project. And you might not be suited for that specific project that you want to be working on, not yet. But you keep sending them artwork. So they might feel that you might not be suited for this particular project, but you might be suited for this particular project. Whatever you can do in order to get in on your foot in on the door and show that you're dependable on finishing. It's really a big thing to be able to finish your work. A lot of artists start things, but they don't know how to finish stuff. One of the things is starting small on projects. Start something small. A small little 10-page project, 8-page project, 3-page project, and see how that works out for you. And that whole process of starting and finishing, getting what that feels like. And if you're able to do that for yourself, then that means you're able to do it for somebody else, because nobody wants to put money into something where they believe that you've coaxed them into telling them that you're going to finish this project, but you're not able to do it because you don't know how to finish your work. So keep that in mind.
And a lot of publishers have their submission guidelines on their websites as well.
They do. And it's what's really nice, being that having the connection that we do now like this, you're able to just go ahead and have your stuff on Instagram. And whether or not you know it, sometimes publishers are looking at you depending on whether or not you're posting all the time. So I've been fortunate enough doing the work that I've been doing for long enough that I get hit up and people follow up with me and are paying attention to me, and I have no idea until they actually contact me directly. So that's the benefit of putting your work online. That really helps too.
Since it's pre-Comic-Con, and we talk a lot about, even though, like we say, we can't go to shows, but traditionally speaking, we would be getting ready to go to the big show. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like setting up at San Diego, what it's like being at the big show, doing the big show, give people a sense of because that's it's not all the glamour, not everybody is Jim Lee at San Diego Comic-Con. So like I say, why don't you share a little of your experience with the nice folks?
Sure. So I've been going to conventions since I started going in '93 for my very first Comic-Con San Diego. When I walked up those middle brick steps, one of the first people that I met when I turned around and heard his voice was Stan Lee. I got to shake his hand, and he talked with me, my friend, and we walked in together. And that was my first experience of San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh my God.
So I didn't get a picture with him, but I do have a picture with him. I think the last couple of years that he was around, I would see Stan quite often at different shows and whatnot. But I had that experience. That was my very first, experience with Comic-Con. When I started doing the show where it became my job, setting up for the show is always a stress situation. You want to make sure that you have everything printed. You want to make sure that you have everything covered. It's the most expensive show to set up for. We're worrying about the hotel, worrying about the travel, worrying about the production of all the material that you're going to have on the table, plus the cost of the, whatever else, food while you're there for that week. There's just a number of things that play into it, and it's the most stressful show, but even though it is the most stressful show, it's the most beneficial show because it's a big media thing, and there's people from all over the world. And it's turned into this red carpet show in such a way where you have larger companies that are there that are looking for artists and illustrators and whatever to find the next property and to find the next big thing for, the following year. And so, if you're looking to talk to people that work in specific industries of movies, comic books, animation, that's the place to be. Video games as well, so that's the place to be. It's really hard to get into. Once you do, you don't want to leave. Once you lose your spot, it's hard to get that spot back. You have to be somebody that's somebody in order to get your spot back. I find it very stressful, and I feel like the whole thing is a big endurance ride. Up until that point, you're getting phone calls. I get phone calls quite often a couple weeks beforehand. Hey, do you have an extra badge? Can I get you into show? Can you get me into the show? It doesn't work that way. Have to go through this whole spiel. It doesn't work that way any longer. You're trying to have exclusive stuff for those individuals that do the show. You try to have the best and most of your exclusive stuff for that show because whoever is going to be there is going to be somebody that's going to take your material and show it to somebody else, or it's one of your collectors, or it happens to kind of help you get that next project job. So you're always trying to kind of show your best self and best work at that show. It is a very fun show, but it is an endurance ride, I would have to say. And I feel like after you're done with Comic-Con, you need a vacation, because it's funny, a lot of people go to Comic-Con because that's their vacation. Yeah. But when you're working it and the amount of work and effort that goes into it, you're definitely, you need to decompress. And the week after, I try to do that as best as possible.
That's great.
That was kind of the answer I was fishing for, is that it's fun, it's a lot of work, but man, it's a long haul. Even as a fan, it's a long haul. Hanging out with you is always a big fun part of it, though.
Yeah, I always really appreciate when you guys are there and you guys come by and check on me, because I know that I'm like handling like 5-6 day conversations, and I've got people at the table, and I'm trying to draw, I'm trying to sign something, and it's just this whirlwind of a bunch of stuff. And then at the end of the day, somebody asks you, "Are you hungry?" And you are, but you're so tired you don't know what you want to eat. and so everybody has this like glazed look of like, all right, we're going to do this again tomorrow. You walk out after the public has walked out with all your other fellow artists, and you're all walking out, and that's when you run into the fellow artists that you have. Everybody's kind of walking out and decompressing, and you just kind of catch up in those conversations of like what's been going on, and like maybe since the last show or maybe since the last year. And that's what's really fun too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what about your classes that you're teaching? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I have an illustration course coming up. I'm doing it with the Arsenal. The Arsenal is a Japantown. They are an art store in Japantown, San Jose, Japantown, to be specific. I've been teaching with them for some time now. I handle their middle school art class, but I'm going to be doing an illustration camp online. So for 5 days, starting July 27th, I'm going to be going through my process of how to start and finish different styles and mediums. So I'm going to be dealing with pencil, graphite, and color pencils. I'm going to be using markers. I'm going to be using watercolor. I'm going to be using inking. I'm going to go over the process of how I use each of these tools and how I go through starting something and finishing something. And at the end of all that, throughout the week of going through all these different styles, I'm going to pick the best one. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about formatting that artwork and making it into a print. How do I get from all that and how do I finish it and make a final product, and how do I come to that decision? So for those that are looking to get into illustrating and want to learn some techniques, I'm going to be talking about my process, how I've gone about doing it over my career. And then for those of you that also wonder about how I go about making my work into a print, I'm going to talk about that at the end of the course on that Friday. And so it's a week course. It's for $185, and we're going to go ahead and it's going to be starting on July 27th, and we're going to be doing for an hour and a half, and we'll start the class at 2 p.m. the workshop. So sign up now at the Arsenal sj.com, and you can find the link if you follow me on Instagram. You can find a link on my bio. If you go to the arsenalsj.com, you will find the listing under workshops, and you can go ahead and sign up that way. Now, we're also going to be doing a second illustration camp in August as well. For those that missed the first one, we're going to go ahead and try to do it again in August, and I'll be posting up those dates fairly soon as well.
And what's the age range for the 27th?
So it's open to all ages. It's, if you're able to understand and want to get into illustration, and you've been following my work for some time and you want to find out the little tricks and nuances of the things that I do in order to create the things that I have over these years, I would suggest you tune in and participate and watch and ask questions. For the age range, looking for I guess middle school and up. If you happen to be younger, I would say anyone under 10 years old, I would say have your parent watch with you, just in case I cover something that maybe you don't understand or you need more explanation. That's always helpful as well. But we want to go ahead and have it open to all ages. So if you've been following my work, love to have you, and hopefully it helps you out. And it's a good course, and we'll try to streamline it for August as well.
That's great.
Love
Any
it.
questions?
Nope. We got any questions
Nope,
from the
I think you answered them all.
from the folks? Awesome. And that brings us right about to our time. So
Awesome.
your presentation was
Perfect.
spot on, sir. Spot on.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for doing this. I
Yeah,
really
thank
appreciate you letting us pick your brain. Appreciate you sharing your time, your talent, your experience, all those things. I know that I don't know, as an artist, there's lots of reasons you don't want to share your secrets or whatnot. So anyway, like I say, I appreciate you sharing your time with us. It's always fun hanging out with you.
Thank you guys always for supporting my work. I really appreciate it. I love doing this, and hopefully we can go ahead and do this again where I draw a little bit more, and we are able to do maybe a different type of course like we talked about beforehand.
Would love that.
For sure.
Absolutely.
We'd totally love that.
Yes.
And it seems like we're getting a great response, so other people would love that too.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And for everybody that's watching, I really appreciate it. You guys have a good one.
Bye.
You
Thanks,
too.
Emo.
Thanks, Ben. And folks at home, that wraps us up for this event of Black Cat Classroom of the Black Cat Comics Rock and Milpitas Pre-Comic-Con. Join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. where our special guest is Comic-Con extraordinaire Steve Wyatt. Thanks for watching. We'll see you then.